Okay, does this happen to anybody else? You sit down with a juicy QPC, some McNuggets, and those golden fries from McDonald's. Then you take a long sip of your Sprite because you can still hear your mama saying, "Don't fill up on that drink before you eat your food." But you're grown now, so you do what you want.
Share and share alike with the 20-piece McNuggets from McDonald's for just $6. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Julie Green had a smart son. Everyone would tell her. Whether Carson was rattling off license plate numbers, repeating words in a foreign language, or reading aloud from the local paper as a toddler, people noticed. But their praise was often followed by a pause and look of concern. Perhaps he was too smart. They would say, "You might want to speak to his doctor." At 3 years old, Carson was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And though our research and understanding has come a long way, all Green knew at the time was that her son would be labeled as different.
We really did not know much more. In the media, we had Rain Man. I knew absolutely nothing about autism beyond that, like most people. And really just the rhetoric around it was kind of panic, tragedy. The discourse was really very different. It was a lot of fear mongering and a lot of pressure on parents. Like, if you don't hurry and get all these interventions, your child won't be able to do X, Y, and Z. They won't be able to live a fulfilling life.
And so Green and her husband threw Carson into the various programs being recommended. But as Green writes in her new book, Motherness, a memoir of generational autism, parenthood, and radical acceptance, many of the therapies ended up doing more damage than good. She says the constant cycle of practitioners pointing out Carson's deficits impacted both his development and self-esteem.
When you're constantly being corrected and led to believe that the way you are existing is not the right way of being, I think you internalize a lot of that pressure and that negative self-belief. So unfortunately, as a parent, you really want the best for your child, and you're led to believe you have to hurry and do all of these therapies. So you're doing it from this place of wanting the best for your child, but not actually realizing that sometimes it could have a negative impact.
Thankfully, not all the experiences were harmful. He tried applied behavioral analysis therapy, language and speech therapy, and occupational therapy, all of which had positive effects. However, there was always this pressure looming over the family to be better.
Looking back, I wish I hadn't felt such pressure, and I could have just enjoyed being with him, enjoyed that connection without both of us getting trapped in that pressure to help him achieve certain milestones and always pushing him to develop, because autistic kids will develop often kind of on their own timeline. They do need supports, but they have to be delivered in a way that's supportive and enjoyable and not within a framework that's telling them, that critical framework that's inadvertently telling them they're wrong the way they are.
These critiques are ones Green is all too familiar with. People felt comfortable pointing out any of her perceived flaws growing up because they deemed it a symptom of her being an only child.
It was, she's really used to getting her own way. She's really kind of difficult and picky and spoiled. So these are all framed as like personality flaws in a way. And also she's extremely shy. And there was such a stigma even attached with shyness when I was growing up that, you really have to change. Why are you like this? Because I would often I guess it was the form of anxiety and social confusion. So I would often observe people, and I was just very, very quiet because that social confusion of not really knowing what to say, or if I was kind of shutting down, I would turn mute.
These similarities aren't the only parallels Green's noticed between herself and Carson. She could sympathize with his sensory issues, and they both experienced some form of face blindness, finding it hard to recognize familiar people in their lives.
It was a little uncanny because there would be this crossover at times, would be like, well, I'm really sensitive to that as well. Or, gee, I really struggle when there's a change of plans and transitions. And there were these echoes of seeing myself in him. But at the same time, it was just so different. In a lot of ways, he fit more of the traditional picture we have of boys with autism. So I really just did not connect the dots because I thought, well, I have some friends. I've had social issues, but again, not to the extent that he did. I had, no major issues with language. I sat on the fence for so long, and it really wasn't until the general dialogue and understanding of autism in girls and women and how it might look different. It wasn't really until that conversation started happening, like almost 10 years after he was diagnosed, that it even occurred to me that it was a possibility.
At the time, Green had been blogging about autism and parenting. Through that community, she met a mother who was autistic herself. The more they spoke, the more Green realized how similar their stories sounded.
That's when the dots sort of connected for me, because really my son's experience, I say in the book, you can't really compare a 12-year-old boy who's autistic with, a 44-year-old woman, because I've had so many decades of making my own coping mechanisms and just living life. And also just our experiences were so different. So, I say it's like a Venn diagram. There was always this overlap where there were similarities, but also just so much difference that I didn't see it until I had actually connected with an autistic woman.
Girls with autism often go undiagnosed because they don't fit the stereotypical signs seen in boys. Many are able to mask their symptoms in order to fit society's expectations. So it took 44 years for Green to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. It changed everything. Receiving the diagnosis was like a corrective lens had been placed over Green's life, finally allowing her to see with 20/20 vision for the first time.
On the surface of it, nothing really changes. You have the same challenges and you have the same talents, but it's, the entire way that you look at yourself.
So many memories that never made any sense suddenly had new context.
Well, I've always had very kind of intense sensory issues. Again, when you're young, it's framed as, why are you so picky? I had a lot of issues with clothing, which is super, I guess that's one of the hallmarks for a lot of people with autism. I recently shaved my hair. I have a buzz cut, which is not for fashion purposes, but this is kind of a recurring thing in my life where it sounds crazy and you think it's crazy. I thought it was crazy. At various points in my life, I just could not tolerate the sensation of hair on my scalp. So again, these were things that were framed in my childhood and adolescence as, things that were basically wrong with my personality, as opposed to understanding that, yes, there was anxiety, but there was a bigger piece that was informing my behavior and the way I was experiencing the world.
Green realized she had been masking her whole life. How she presented herself to the world was a character molded from whatever would help her fit in. Now she's working to unlearn that instinct.
When you've grown up, and especially in your mid-40s, and you've been a people pleaser all your life, a lot of this is just gender roles and gender bias as well. It's not exclusive to autism, and perfectionism. So again, these things still exist for me. I still have a lot of anxiety. I think it's just this awareness now where I didn't have this understanding when I was young. So I would push myself to the point of overwhelm or burnout and end up very, very ill. And I was having very severe and frequent migraine attacks where I'd be throwing up and missing work and all sorts of things. And I didn't understand that. I thought this was a physical ailment. And I didn't understand that And sometimes it's the culmination of this buildup on the nervous system and stress and anxiety and sensory overwhelm that was causing this.
Now Green's able to create a schedule that fits her needs without feeling shame about when she needs to rest. It's an awareness that's also helped her understand what her son needs. No two people's experience with autism is the same. For Carson, many of his challenges stem from emotional regulation. When he gets triggered, he becomes emotionally explosive. And while many people's first instinct is to try and calm the situation with words, Green realized that type of verbal soothing isn't what Carson responds to.
And when someone's in that fight or flight mode, telling them to calm down, telling them they can't sort of process language. So I think for us, a big thing was learning, he can't process language in that moment. So he basically just needs someone to be close by to make sure he's safe, to know that we're there, but to wait until his nervous system has kind of come down. And then you can talk through, how to maybe manage a situation next time, or you can kind of do the damage control later. So really in the moment, it's just co-regulating and trying to give the nervous system a chance to calm down.
Green says that Carson's been able to get a better grasp of his outburst as he's aged. His emotional regulation now at 17 is much different than 10 years prior.
His nervous system is a little bit better able to cope with certain things, but it's also building that awareness for him. And I think now when he gets upset, he still might shout. He still tends to react in a bigger way, but it's not physical. He's also learning how to kind of manage and advocate for himself, which is a big piece.
Learning the cause of Carson's behaviors and what those were signaling were huge parts of recognizing his needs. Unfortunately, this awareness isn't always present in schools, where Green says behavior is often viewed as either good or bad.
At all levels, in all grades, I think a lot of educators are still seeing behavior through kind of a disciplinary lens, as opposed to, they say in autism circles that, all behavior is communication. So if a child is acting out, that's kind of a signal to you that there's like a lagging skill or something that they're missing or needing. Are they feeling overwhelmed? Is there a sensory issue? Do they need regular breaks to move around? Unfortunately, behavior in a lot of schools is still met with disciplinary measures. They lose access to recess, which they desperately need, or, they get detentions or suspensions in high school.
What it all boils down to is a mindset shift. And Green doesn't think it's only needed in schools. When Carson was young, his outbursts sometimes made it difficult for him to socialize with other kids. Someone would be pushed to the ground or a hat would be stolen, and the fun would suddenly be over.
So there were a lot of well-meaning people who did include us and make those attempts, which I'm really grateful for. There were other people who were terrible and pretty much likened my child to being a monster and wanted him out of school, wanted him out of the classroom. And I think there's space for all those emotions, right? I can understand other parents obviously want to keep their children safe, but that is not the way to help build an inclusive society. We also can't just throw everybody together and hope for the best.
Green says it takes support and resources, but believes there's a balance that allows for a safe and fun time for all kids. It's a mission that will take more public awareness and understanding, which she's contributing to with her new book, Motherness, available now wherever books are sold. You can find more information about Julie M. Green and all of our guests on our website, ingoodhealthpodcast.org. For more behind the scenes, follow In Good Health Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farrah. Our executive producer is Amira Zavari. I'm Elizabeth Westfield.
Amazon presents Jamal versus the Shih Tzu. Descending from the gray wolf, Shih Tzus live by their own untamed primal code of not giving a single Shih Tzu. But Jamal shopped on Amazon and bought dog treats, chew toys, and 32 ounces of carpet cleaner. Hey Jamal, you've been promoted to pack leader. Save the everyday with Amazon.
Okay, does this happen to anybody else? You sit down with a juicy QPC, some McNuggets, and those golden fries from McDonald's. Then you take a long sip of your Sprite because you can still hear your mama saying, don't fill up on that drink before you eat your food. But you're grown now, so you do what you want.
Share and share alike with the 20-piece McNuggets from McDonald's for just $6. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.